It was just past midnight when Marcus Harper stepped through the doorway of his Charleston home, his polished shoes echoing on the tile as he moved with a stiff, hurried gait. In one hand, he carried a thick leather folder, in the other, a phone that hadn't stopped buzzing all night. He ignored it now, silencing the screen with a grimace. The kitchen lights were still on, a soft yellow glow illuminating the tidy counters and the delicate china teacup resting near the stove. Elise sat quietly, her robe wrapped snug around her, both hands curled around the warm cup. Her gaze lifted slowly to meet her husband's. Without a word, Marcus strode forward and dropped the folder onto the kitchen island with a loud thud. The sound echoed through the otherwise peaceful room, breaking the silence like a gavel. "Sign here," he barked, tapping the top page. "Here, and here." He didn't even sit down. His voice was colder than the rain now starting to patter against the windows. He could have been addressing a tenant, a business partner, a stranger, not the woman he had been married to for 12 years. Elise's eyes didn't flicker. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. Instead, she glanced down at the papers, her brow barely creasing as she scanned the text with practiced calm. The words were dense with legal jargon, though the message was clear: total relinquishment. No property. No spousal support. No assets. Just a severance. A clean break that left her with nothing. "You've got to be kidding," she said softly, though not in shock, more like someone confirming what they already knew. Marcus pushed a silver pen toward her. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Elise took the pen slowly, twirling it once in her fingers. She could smell the cologne on his collar, woody, sharp, distinctly not the one he used to wear. And then there was the faint trace of lipstick, pale pink, barely there in the dim light. Jasmine's shade, no doubt. Still, Elise said nothing. She signed the first page, then the second, then the third. No hesitation. No drama. Just fluid, graceful movements. A ballet of detachment. Marcus frowned. "You're taking this remarkably well. Would you rather I screamed?" He shifted awkwardly. "I mean, I expected you to at least argue." Elise looked up at him then, her expression unreadable. "You've made your choice. What would be the point?" He looked away. "Jasmine is different. She has ambition. She's going places. You were content to stay stuck in that community college job, tutoring kids for pocket change." A flash of amusement touched Elise's lips. Her pocket change had quietly funded a sizable portfolio, all managed under a private account Marcus had never bothered to ask about. She'd also helped her department secure a federal grant last spring, an initiative that could double her school's funding for underprivileged students. But none of that mattered to Marcus. Her work had always been invisible to him. "I hope she gives you everything you're chasing," Elise said softly. He scoffed, stuffing the signed documents back into the folder with a flourish. "You're making this too easy." She shrugged. "Why fight when the outcome is already decided?" Satisfied, Marcus slipped the folder into his briefcase, pulling out his phone before even turning to leave. Probably texting Jasmine. Probably boasting. His hand was already on the doorknob when Elise's voice stopped him. "Marcus." He paused. "What now?" "You may want to reread what you just had me sign." His laugh was dry, dismissive. "I wrote them." Elise tilted her head slightly. "Did you? Or did Devin write them?" Marcus turned slowly, the color draining just a fraction from his face. "What did you say?" "Good night," Elise said, turning back toward the kettle. "I'm making tea." The door slammed behind him, harder than necessary. Elise waited until the house was still again before pulling her phone from the counter. "Elise, it's done." He took the bait. The reply came almost instantly. "Leah, you're brilliant. Let's make it official." Elise took a deep breath and closed her eyes, savoring the quiet victory. Months of preparation had led to this moment. The first clue came last winter, Marcus's sudden weekend conferences, his changed passwords, the way he guarded his phone like it was state property. But it was the lipstick stain on his shirt in March that sealed it. He hadn't even noticed when she gently took the shirt from the hamper and snapped a photo of the collar. That night, Elise had called Leah, her best friend and a forensic accountant. Within 48 hours, they were joined by Morgan Blake, an aggressive yet brilliant attorney known for her airtight legal traps. Together, the three women crafted a counterplan. Devon, Marcus's golfing buddy and self-proclaimed legal guru, had no license to practice law. His so-called legal documents were laughably flawed. When Marcus asked him to draft the divorce agreement, Elise's team intercepted the version sent via his shared printer. Morgan had planted a Trojan monitor days earlier, anticipating his move. Then came the replacement, a perfectly formatted stack of documents that Marcus would never bother to read. The top pages looked similar, but the details buried within were game changers. The revised documents transferred ownership of all joint marital assets to Elise, citing mutual agreement to distribute property in full. Page 6 included a signed and notarized statement of Marcus's infidelity, financial misappropriation, and coercion. And just to ensure airtight evidence, the entire midnight encounter had been recorded on the new kitchen security system Elise had installed last month. After the supposed break-in scare, Marcus shrugged off. She sipped her tea and walked over to the small study at the back of the house. There, in the top drawer of the desk, were digital backups of every message Marcus had sent to Jasmine, every fake document drafted by Devon, and the bank statements that detailed the misused joint funds. Everything was in place. Tomorrow would be the reckoning. But for now, Elise let herself bask in the peace of the moment, not because she had won, but because she had refused to lose herself. Marcus thought she'd roll over, thought she was meek, thought he was the only one thinking 3 steps ahead. He had no idea that the woman he'd tried to erase was about to become the author of his undoing. And Elise Harper? She had just begun to write the next chapter, on her terms. The first call came at 6:48 a.m. Elise Harper was already awake, sitting on the sun-dappled porch of her Charleston home with a blanket wrapped around her legs and a steaming cup of ginger tea in her hands. The early light painted the sky in soft pastels, and the only sounds were birds chirping and the distant hum of traffic from the nearby boulevard. Peaceful. Rejuvenating. Her phone vibrated on the small table next to her. Marcus, incoming call. She ignored it. The call rang out. Then again at 6:51. 6:55. 7:01. After the fourth call, the voicemails started to come in, mumbling at first, then growing more panicked. She took a slow sip of tea, savoring the moment. By 7:15, the text messages arrived. Elise, something's wrong with the papers. Call me back. Now. Did you change the documents? Elise. Answer me. She placed the phone face down and leaned back in her chair, letting the warm morning light rest on her face like a balm. At 8 a.m. sharp, Leah pulled up in a silver SUV, parking neatly in front of the house. Her laptop bag was slung over one shoulder, her expression unreadable but amused. Elise opened the door before she could knock. Someone's in a mood this morning, Leah said with a raised eyebrow, gesturing to the screen of Elise's phone, which now displayed 16 missed calls and 22 messages. He panicked. Right on schedule, Elise replied calmly. I had tea while watching it unfold. Goddess energy, Leah said, laughing as she entered. Let's check the fallout. They sat together at the dining table, the same one where Marcus had arrogantly presented his demand for freedom just hours earlier. Now, Leah opened her laptop, clicking into a secure server and pulling up the digital trail. Security footage is backed up, Leah said, nodding. Clear visuals, full audio. He admitted to coercing you. He mentioned his affair. It's all there. Elise tapped her fingers on the wood, thinking. And the email? Sent, Leah confirmed. Marcus's employer should be receiving it about now. At exactly 8:30, the doorbell rang. Elise rose and opened the door to find Marcus standing there, his normally pristine appearance in shambles. His button-up shirt was wrinkled, hair tousled, tie crooked, and he hadn't shaved. His eyes darted between Elise and the interior of the house, taking in the unfamiliar calm. What the hell did you make me sign? He blurted, storming past her without waiting for an invitation. Come in, Elise said smoothly. Have a seat. Let's talk. Marcus stopped cold when he spotted Leah sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. And you are? Leah Washington, she said politely. Senior Compliance Advisor and Legal Liaison for Morgan Blake and Associates. He flinched. Morgan Blake? Elise walked past him, pouring herself another cup of tea. The same firm I told you my cousin used during her divorce. You thought I was bluffing. He fumbled with his briefcase, pulling out the documents he'd taken home so confidently. These aren't the originals, he said breathlessly. You switched them. No, Marcus, Elise said, sitting across from him. Those are exactly the documents you handed me. You just didn't bother to read them. Too busy texting Jasmine, I assume. His face flushed with a mix of rage and fear. This is fraud. Actually, Leah interjected, rotating the laptop screen toward him, what you did was fraud. Coercing your wife into signing documents under duress? Presenting unlicensed, illegally drafted legal papers? That's textbook deception. But the good news is, you signed the correct documents. Legally binding, authenticated, and notarized. Marcus collapsed into the chair, staring blankly at the screen. The transfer of all joint assets into Elise's name, Leah continued, was confirmed by your signature on pages 2, 4, and 9. Then there's your signed admission of extramarital conduct, dates, details, and financial abuse. That alone is enough for Elise to take this case to court and walk away with everything. And then some. He looked up sharply. You set me up. No, Elise said, her voice calm but sharp as glass. You set yourself up. I just did my homework. Leah pushed a new folder across the table. These are the actual divorce documents. Properly prepared. Reviewed by 3 separate attorneys. And vastly different from the fantasy version your buddy Devin typed up. Marcus swallowed hard, his bravado draining. This is illegal. You can't. Elise can, Leah said. And she did. The house, the savings, the investments, she has the legal right now. And if you choose to contest it, we'll proceed with charges of attempted fraud, coercion, and Devin's unauthorized legal practice. Which, by the way, is already under state bar investigation. Marcus froze. There's video evidence, Marcus, Elise said quietly, pointing toward the corner of the kitchen. That little lens above the cabinet? It caught everything you said last night. He followed her finger and paled. You recorded me? For protection, Elise replied. You walked into our home at midnight with fake legal documents and tried to force me to sign them. I needed protection. Not revenge. Just facts. Marcus looked at the documents again. His hands trembled. If this goes public, I'll lose my job. You should have thought of that, Leah said, packing up her laptop, before trying to steal from your wife in the dead of night. He sank lower in the chair, looking smaller than Elise had ever seen him. You have 24 hours to sign those divorce papers, she said, standing slowly. You're welcome to review them with a real attorney, of course. But if we don't hear from your counsel by this time tomorrow, we'll proceed with formal charges. Your choice. Marcus gathered the papers slowly, the full weight of his mistake crashing down like a tidal wave. As he shuffled to the door, he hesitated. Elise. She met his gaze with cool detachment. Your 24 hours begin now. He left without another word. When the door clicked shut, Leah let out a long breath and grinned. That, she said, went better than I could have imagined. Elise finally sat down, closing her eyes briefly. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to exhale fully. He never saw it coming, she whispered. No, Leah said, resting a comforting hand on her shoulder. Because he never thought you were capable. That was his mistake. Marcus Harper didn't sleep that night. He tossed in bed, his mind a carousel of panic, disbelief, and furious regret. The folder of documents Elise had laid before him sat on the nightstand, untouched since he'd returned to the hotel in a daze. He'd read the first 2 pages 3 times and still couldn't believe what he saw. Everything, gone. The accounts, the joint savings, the vacation property in Nashville they'd invested in years ago. The equity in their home. Even his beloved vintage car, which Elise had cleverly registered under a joint trust years earlier, was now legally hers. And the signed affidavit. He hadn't realized how damning that one page could be. I, Marcus Harper, admit to extramarital relations during the course of my marriage, and to using shared marital funds for personal purchases associated with this relationship. It was surreal. How had this happened? He had been so sure. Devin had drafted the original documents in a bar over drinks and claimed he'd watched 5 seasons of Suits. "No one reads these things anyway," he'd said, chuckling. But Elise had read. And prepared. And waited. By 10 a.m. the next morning, Marcus's phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't Elise or Leah or even Devin. It was Human Resources. Elise sat in her classroom at Blue Ridge Community College, grading midterm papers with a soft instrumental playlist humming in the background. She loved mornings like these, peaceful, productive, and deeply rooted in purpose. Her phone vibrated once, a text from Leah. "He just got called into HR. They got the package." Elise replied with a simple, "Perfect timing." She looked around at the classroom, walls decorated with student projects, inspirational quotes about resilience and learning hand-lettered on the whiteboard. To outsiders like Marcus, this job had always seemed beneath her. But to Elise, it had been her anchor. Her sanctuary. And now, it had become her springboard. At 12:13 p.m., her phone buzzed again. Ethan Blake, senior partner at Morgan Blake and Associates, was calling. "Elise," Ethan greeted her warmly. "You'll be pleased to know Marcus signed." Elise smiled. "Barely 24 hours. He tried to negotiate," Ethan said, amusement evident in his voice. "But once I mentioned the security footage and the risk of criminal fraud charges, he folded like wet paper. I'm not surprised. He also asked if the documents could be sealed. He's worried about future employment." "Did you agree?" she asked. "We advised that transparency was part of the settlement terms, per the original agreement. You hold all the leverage." Elise nodded to herself. "Good." As she hung up, a small but real sense of finality began to settle over her. Marcus had signed. The plan had worked. But it wasn't just about the legal win, it was about the affirmation of her instincts, her intelligence, and the quiet strength she'd been told didn't exist. Later that evening, Leah stopped by with 2 bottles of wine and a smug expression. "Heard about Devin?" she asked, kicking off her shoes and settling onto the couch. "No, what now?" "State bar's investigating him. Apparently, Elise, you weren't the first person he tried to pass off fake documents to. But you were the first to outmaneuver him." Elise raised a brow. "That doesn't surprise me. And guess who else is out of a job?" Leah added. "HR got the files this morning, and with Elise's affidavit and the footage, Marcus was deemed a liability. They're launching a full audit of his department." Elise leaned back, letting it all sink in. In less than 48 hours, everything had shifted. The man who'd once controlled the finances, the home, the decisions, now had no home with her, no assets to claim, and no career to cushion his fall. "What about Jasmine?" Elise asked suddenly, as she poured them both a glass of rosé. Leah chuckled. "She cleared out her desk by lunchtime. Probably looking for a new executive to latch onto." They toasted, quietly, without celebration, but with the shared satisfaction of justice earned. The next day, Elise returned to work and found a small envelope in her faculty mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note from one of her students. "Thank you for always making space for people like me. You don't just teach economics. You teach us how to believe in ourselves." She blinked hard, her throat tightening unexpectedly. This was her real reward. Not the house. Not the savings. Not the legal victory. But this, a reminder that who she was had never been small. Just unseen. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the Charleston trees, Elise sat in her home office, newly hers. No more sterile white curtains or leather-bound books she hadn't picked. She had redecorated the room in soft blues and warm woods. A framed security still sat on the shelf now, Marcus, mid-motion, sliding papers across the table with arrogant certainty. A moment frozen in time, his downfall captured in 1080p. Leah had gifted it with a grin. A reminder, she'd said, that sometimes the best defense is letting them think they're winning. Under the photo, Elise had arranged her teaching certificates, a photo of her class on field day, and a modest crystal plaque for her contributions to economic education. It was the life Marcus thought he could diminish. But it was the life that had given her purpose. Her phone buzzed with a new text, from an unknown number. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I should have appreciated what I had. Elise stared at the screen for a moment. She thought of the man who once told her she lacked drive. The man who tried to take everything without expecting her to fight back. The man who thought silence meant weakness. Then she typed her reply. Thank you for the apology. But you were wrong. I didn't end up with nothing. I got myself back. She hit send, blocked the number, and set the phone down. The stars were coming out. The breeze was light. And for the first time in a long time, Elise Harper felt whole. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Marcus. He had been silent since her final message. It was from the HR director at Marcus's former company. The email was crisp and professional. Following the review of your submitted materials, we have initiated a full audit of Mr. Harper's division. Your thorough documentation has proven critical in uncovering internal discrepancies. We thank you for your cooperation. Elise read the message twice. Not because she was surprised, but because she wanted to feel the weight of those words. Your documentation has proven critical. For years, Marcus had scoffed when she kept receipts just in case, when she logged dates and flagged inconsistencies in their joint accounts. He called it obsessive, neurotic, a waste of time. But now, those very habits, the ones he belittled, were the ones unraveling his career. She forwarded the message to Leah, who replied almost immediately. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being meticulous. Elise smiled. Later that afternoon, Leah came by with a small wrapped gift and 2 lattes. You're officially free, she announced, placing the coffees on the table. Divorce is finalized. Judge signed off this morning. Already? Elise asked, blinking. That was fast. You had every document in perfect order. Ethan said he'd never seen a case that airtight. You walked in prepared, and Marcus walked in thinking he was invincible. Elise carefully opened the gift. Inside was a simple frame holding a screenshot from her kitchen security camera. It showed Marcus mid-gesture, smugly sliding the fake papers across the table, oblivious that he was capturing his own defeat. Elise burst out laughing. You didn't. Oh, I did, Leah said, grinning. A reminder, sometimes the best offense is letting your opponent think they're winning. Elise placed the photo on her home office shelf next to her teaching awards and the note from a student thanking her for believing in me when no one else did. That night, they sipped wine on the back porch, watching the Charleston sunset streak the sky with warm oranges and pinks. Elise leaned back in her chair, the soft breeze brushing her face. You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't noticed that lipstick stain? She asked quietly. Leah tilted her head. Maybe. But you would have figured it out eventually. You've always paid attention, you just didn't give yourself credit. Elise nodded. I think. For a long time, I let him tell me who I was. And I believed him. That I was small. That I was unremarkable. Just a quiet teacher. Quiet doesn't mean weak, Leah said, raising her glass. It means strategic. The following week, Elise received another unexpected message, this time from Marcus's mother, Veronica Harper. They had rarely seen eye to eye. Veronica had always made Elise feel like a placeholder, someone temporary and unimpressive. But the message was different. Elise, I heard about the divorce. I know we've never been close, but I wanted to say, congratulations on the promotion. Head of curriculum, isn't it? I suppose your attention to detail served you after all. Elise stared at the message for a moment. She replied politely but didn't invite further conversation. She didn't need Veronica's approval. But the soft acknowledgement felt oddly satisfying. Later that same day, while picking up groceries at the local market, she ran into Veronica in person. The older woman hesitated, clearly unsure whether to stop or pretend she hadn't noticed. Elise, ever composed, smiled and called out gently, Hi, Veronica. Veronica turned, smoothing her coat. Elise. I didn't expect to see you here. I live just up the street, Elise replied, keeping her tone light. Still in the neighborhood. Veronica nodded. I heard. Marcus isn't doing well. The new girl left him. Took a job out west. Apparently for someone more established. His words. I'm sorry to hear that, Elise said. And she meant it, in a distant, compassionate way. I hope he's learning something from it. Veronica's expression softened. "I think we all underestimated you." Elise offered a small, warm smile. "Many people do." As she walked away with her groceries, she realized something had changed, not just in how others saw her, but in how she saw herself. There was a new steadiness to her stride, a quiet strength that had always been there, just waiting to be recognized. That evening, Elise sat down in her home office to finalize her next semester's lecture notes. A candle flickered gently beside her, casting soft shadows against the wall. The security camera photo of Marcus still held its place, no longer a symbol of revenge, but of resilience. She picked up her phone to check her messages and saw a new one from an unfamiliar number. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I should have appreciated what I had when I had it." She stared at the screen, emotions washing over her, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just clarity. She typed her reply carefully. "Thank you for the apology. But you were wrong. I didn't end up with nothing. I got myself back." Then, with calm fingers, she blocked the number and placed her phone face down. She rose, poured herself a small glass of wine, and stepped onto the porch once again. The air was crisp, the sky deep indigo, the stars beginning to bloom above. Elise sat back in her chair, legs curled under her, wine glass resting on her knee. She was no longer haunted by Marcus's betrayal, no longer weighed down by years of subtle dismissal. She was free. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged. She hadn't waged war. She'd outsmarted him, with preparation, patience, and poise. And in the end, he hadn't taken anything from her. He had handed her everything. A year had passed since the night Marcus Harper had tried to erase Elise from their shared life with the stroke of a pen. 12 months since he stood in her kitchen, reeking of cologne and arrogance, confident she would break at his command. 12 months since Elise had let him believe he held all the power, only to watch him walk directly into the trap of his own making. Now, that moment was nothing more than a photograph, literally. The still image captured by her kitchen's security camera, now framed and hanging above her desk, showed Marcus mid-gesture, pushing those infamous divorce papers across the table, oblivious to the fact he was documenting his own downfall. A subtle smirk still clung to his face in the photo, a snapshot of a man convinced of his superiority. Elise kept the image close, not out of spite, but as a symbol of triumph, of how quiet strength, properly wielded, could upend even the most insidious betrayal. Her office had transformed since then. Gone were the stiff, leather-bound books Marcus insisted on keeping to impress guests. In their place were shelves of meaningful items, gifts from her students, poetry books she never had time to read before, a glass trophy recognizing her leadership in the district's curriculum innovation team. A handwritten letter from one of her former students, folded and framed beside the trophy, read: "Thank you for teaching me that smart doesn't mean loud, and strong doesn't mean angry. You made me believe being quiet isn't a weakness." Elise read it often. Now, as the 1-year mark approached, she found herself reflecting, not on Marcus's fall, but on her own rise. The woman she had become wasn't new. She had always been there, quietly calculating, patiently preparing. Marcus simply never looked deep enough to see her. He had focused on what she wasn't instead of what she was. To him, Elise was just a teacher. But to the young minds she guided every day, she was a foundation. To her community, she was a leader. And to herself, finally, she was enough. That afternoon, Leah stopped by to drop off a small gift and a bottle of rosé. It had become their tradition, a quiet toast every year on what they jokingly called Independence Day. Elise opened the small package to find a delicate silver pendant engraved with a single word, "Worthy." Leah grinned. Seemed fitting. Elise smiled, her fingers curling around the charm. "It is." They toasted on the porch, the same place Elise had once sat watching Marcus's world unravel via panicked text messages. This time, the only buzz came from the cicadas and the low hum of jazz drifting from inside. "I got a call from a publisher," Elise said after a while. "The manuscript I submitted? They want to move forward." Leah's eyes widened. "Wait, the book? Teaching Through the Storm?" Elise nodded, her smile deepening. "It's happening." The book was more than a memoir, it was a roadmap. A guide for women who had been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. It chronicled how she'd reclaimed her life not through rage or revenge, but through intentionally, strategy, and grace. The publisher called it empowering. Elise simply called it honest. Later that week, Elise attended a school district conference where she was honored for her work in developing trauma-informed education. As she stepped onto the stage, she thought briefly of how far she'd come, from the woman who once doubted her voice to the one now speaking to a packed auditorium about resilience and reform. In the front row sat fellow educators, former students, and even a few parents who had driven 2 towns over to see her receive the award. The applause was thunderous. And afterward, people approached her with stories of their own. "I read your article," one woman whispered, holding Elise's hand. "It helped me leave my marriage. You gave me the courage to speak up at work," another said, tears brimming. Each comment was a quiet echo of the truth Elise now lived: strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it sat silently in the background, waiting for the right moment to rise. One evening, while grocery shopping, Elise once again crossed paths with Veronica Harper. This time, there was no awkwardness, just an unexpected moment of clarity between 2 women who had once stood on opposite ends of respect. "I saw the article about you in the Education Journal," Veronica said, pausing beside a display of apples. "You've done well." "Thank you," Elise replied kindly. Veronica hesitated. "Marcus. He's still struggling. I'm not sure he's learned anything yet." "I hope he does," Elise said, and meant it. "Everyone deserves the chance to grow." Veronica gave a faint, thoughtful nod. "I think we all misjudged you. Myself included." "It happens," Elise replied gently. "What matters is what you do once you see the truth." That night, as Elise prepared for bed, her phone buzzed once. A text from an unfamiliar number. "Marcus, I heard about your award. I always knew you were smart, I just didn't realize how much." Elise stared at the message for a few seconds before typing her final response. "You didn't know because you never looked." She hit send. Then, without hesitation, she blocked the number for good. She pulled the covers around her and fell asleep easily, peacefully, wrapped in the kind of quiet only a truly free woman knows. A year after her life changed forever, Elise hosted a dinner for her closest friends in the home she'd redesigned for herself. No pretense. No posturing. Just laughter, food, and the soft glow of candlelight flickering on walls she had painted in warm earth tones. She raised her glass toward Leah at the end of the table. "To the life we choose, not the one we're given." Leah raised hers back. "And to the women we become when no one's watching." Elise Harper was never broken. She was simply underestimated. And now? She was unforgettable.